Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 TechTalk. Today's topic is Procure to Pay Overview in Dynamics 365 Supply Chain Management. My name is Alejandra Cabrales, and I will be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this session through Teams live event, and this session is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Hiren, over to you to get us started.
Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you for joining us today as we present today's Tech Talk on Procure to Pay Overview in Dynamics 365 Finance and Supply Chain Management. Purpose of this Tech Talk is to provide you high-level understanding of Procure to Pay business processes and show you some of the capabilities within the system. My name is Hiren Naik, and I'm a Senior Fast Track Solution Architect here at Microsoft, specializing in supply chain functionality. To co-present, joining with me today, my colleagues, Mathieu, Binaisse, and Vijayashankar. In terms of agenda, we'll cover first what is procurement, what are the different types of procurement. Then we'll discuss end-to-end business processes in Procure to Pay. We'll show you the demo using use cases for Procure to Pay processes. In the end, we'll share some useful resources and have some time for Q&A. Without further ado, let's get started, and I will now hand it over to Adi.
Thanks, Hiren. So what is procurement? Procurement plays a major role in the success of a business and crucial in managing the acquisition of materials and services, cost forecasting, and skillful negotiation to impact various facets of an organization, spanning from manufacturing to customer satisfaction. To streamline this complex workflow, the Procure to Pay process comes into play, documenting the entire journey from identifying the need to making the final payment. This comprehensive end-to-end process involves collaboration from numerous individuals across the organization to ensure that all purchases are appropriately sourced, approved, and paid for. The teams involved in this process encompass procurement, purchasing, accounts payable, operations, and naturally, all the other teams that require purchases. Moving on, let's talk about the two procurement types. Direct procurement, also known as goods or production procurement, involves the acquisition of materials, components, or goods that are directly incorporated into the production or sold to a customer. Examples of direct procurement items include raw materials, components, machinery, equipment, and specialized tools. So, for instance, in the automotive industry, direct procurement would involve sourcing engines, tires, steel, and other components needed to manufacture vehicles. Direct procurement items can also include final product. For instance, a retailer can buy vehicles and sell them to final customer. Indirect procurement, also referred to as non-production procurement, pertains to the acquisition of goods, services, or resources that are not directly incorporated into the final product, but are necessary to support the organization's overall operations. These are typically goods and services that are not specific to the industry or product being produced. Examples of indirect procurement items include office supplies, IT equipment, maintenance and repair services, marketing services, professional services, utilities, and facility management. Let's talk about the Procure to Pay process. So the Procure to Pay process is the process of acquiring and paying for goods or services from external sources. It involves several steps such as identifying the need, selecting the vendor, creating and approving the purchase order, receiving and verifying the goods or services, processing and approving the invoice, and finally making the payment. The Procure to Pay process aims to optimize the efficiency, accuracy, and transparency of the procurement cycle and improve the cash flow and vendor relationships of the organization. Manage vendor relationships. This business process area involves managing vendor relationships by identifying and selecting qualified vendors and negotiating contracts. It also covers monitoring vendor performance and maintaining a positive relationship with vendors. There are processes for creating vendor records either manually or through the application process for a vendor through an external vendor collaboration portal. Develop sourcing strategies. This business process area involves developing sourcing strategies by analyzing spend data, identifying cost-saving opportunities, selecting the appropriate sourcing method, and negotiating contracts with vendors. In D365, you can also configure for products to determine the sourcing method for supply forecasting and master planning, as well as set pricing with trade agreements and purchase agreements. Define procurement catalog. This business process area covers the definition of procurement catalogs by creating a standardized list of goods and services that can be purchased. It also covers the setup of pricing and availability information and keeping the catalog accurate. In D365, this process includes not only internal catalogs and categorization of products for procurement, but also external catalogs for punch-out. Define policies and procedures for procurement. This business process area involves establishing guidelines for purchasing, defining the roles and responsibilities of procurement staff, and ensuring compliance with regulations and internal policies. D365 includes features for managing signing limits, approval hierarchies, and workflow configuration to define the approval process along with the procurement policies for rules such as when a purchase requisition is required, when a request for quotation is required, and when a purchase is considered capitalized with integration for fixed assets, as a few examples. Procure materials and services. This business process area includes creating purchase requisition, request for quotation, purchase orders, and purchase agreements. It also includes communication with vendors about the purchases either manually, electronically including EDI, or using a portal such as the vendor collaboration portal. The purchase orders may also come from other business process areas such as project to profit or plan to produce. Receive materials and services. This business process area includes registering and receiving the items or service. If the supplier shares information about products that will be shipped, the details can be used to pre-register the products. When the item registration is complete based on arrival of stock at the inbound dock of the warehouse, the stock is updated accordingly and subsequently receipted. Process vendor invoice. This business process area involves processing vendor invoice by verifying invoice accuracy, matching invoice to purchase orders and goods receipt, and performing two-way or three-way matching. The invoices can be received and processed manually using automation or EDI, for example. D365 also provides invoice register functionality for quick entry to accrue the expense. Issue and settle vendor payments. This business process area involves paying vendors according to the agreed upon payment terms and ensuring that payments are made accurately and on time. Using the invoice payment proposal feature with the D365, invoices can be settled manually or via automation. It also supports payment formats including but not limited to checks, electronic payment, credit cards, and more. The process includes a communication with financial institutions and the generation of files or documents to be sent to the vendor either through mail or electronically. Manage vendor debits and chargebacks. This business process area involves reconciling discrepancies in invoices, issuing debit memos, and managing chargebacks in accordance with contractual agreements. It also includes the process of returning products to vendors and disputing charges from vendors. Create and process promissory notes. This business process area involves creating and managing payment terms and schedules for purchases made on credit. Process vendor rebates and incentives. This business process area involves managing and tracking rebates and incentives offered by vendors. It also covers royalty and broker contract management, making sure that the organization receives the full benefit of these programs. And finally, we have analyzed vendor performance. This business process area involves analyzing vendor performance by measuring key performance indicators, identifying areas for improvement, and communicating with vendors to ensure continuous improvement. D365 offers a supply risk assessment workspace that, alongside performance and risk analysis report, can assist in understanding risk of sourcing shortages and delays. While Procure to Pay is a business process that encompasses the steps for procurement, it also ties into most of the other standard business processes as shown here. And in general, when we're looking at business solutions for procurement, we should think and talk about how someone might use each and all of these processes. Procure to Pay is by no means a process that operates in vacuum. Let's talk about the purchase requisition process. So a purchase requisition is an internal document that authorizes the purchasing department to buy items or services. Depending on the setup of your organization, you can create purchase requisitions for products that your organization uses. A purchase requisition can be subject to a workflow, and the workflow can be set up as a single document for review, or we could route each purchase requisition line for review. After the purchase requisition is approved, it can be used to generate a purchase order, which is an external document that the purchasing department submits to vendors. So after you create a purchase requisition in D365, the items or categories required is specified in the purchase requisition along with other details such as the quantity and date, etc. And the purchase requisition is subsequently submitted. The purchase requisition can then be reviewed by the purchase agent to validate the details in the purchase requisition and update information such as price and vendor details, etc. After review of the purchase requisition, it can be submitted into the workflow for approval by the requisitioner's manager. For example, when a purchase requisition is raised for an amount exceeding $1,000, it requires an approval from manager. A purchasing policy is a collection of rules that controls the requisition process. Purchasing policies help procurement administrators implement their procurement strategy by creating a policy structure that is aligned with the organization's strategic purchasing requirement. For example, this catalog policy rule specifies that in Contoso Entertainment System, when a purchase requisition is approved by the final approver, it is automatically converted to a purchase order, or you can create a catalog policy rule which specifies that the adventure catalog must be used for internal procurement only. Let's look into a use case of purchase requisition. So Contoso Entertainment System manufactures, distributes, and installs home electronic equipment and have multiple distribution channels. Brooke Dryden, who's an HR assistant, wants to raise a request for toner cartridges and paper shredding machine for work purpose. Contoso Entertainment System have a workflow where any purchase requisition raised is sent to purchasing agent for review. They also have a purchasing policy that all purchases above $1,000 require an approval by the manager before a purchase order is created. So in this use case, we will first create a purchase requisition as HR assistant. Then the purchase agent will review and update the purchase requisition. Based on the workflow, the requisitioner's manager will approve the purchase requisition. And finally, the purchasing policy is set up to auto-create purchase order from approved purchase requisition. Now let's dive into the system and see how this works. So HR assistant, Brooke Dryden, needs to create a purchase requisition. So she's going to go into purchase requisitions prepared by me, create a new purchase requisition, and the system creates a purchase requisition number 186. And we're going to specify a name for this purchase requisition, and you have the option to specify the date over here. Let's say okay. And in the header, you can see the status of the purchase requisition, which is still in draft. You have the option to update the date, and we're going to specify the reason as general supplies and give some additional details for this specific purchase requisition. Now we're going to create a line on this purchase requisition. As you can see, it automatically indicates the requester and the buying legal entity for this specific purchase requisition. Now we're going to specify the category, which is toner, give some additional product name, update the quantity. So in this scenario, we're going to say we need 10, specify a unit. You'll notice that the status is still in draft. And in the lines, you can go to address tab to view the address details, and the address is defaulted from the company. Now we're going to create a new line for the other category that we need to create a purchase requisition for. And now we're going to specify the category as paper shredder. And again, update the product name, quantity, we want to specify that as 2 and unit of each. Once Brooke Dryden is happy with all the details here, we go into the workflow button on top and then submit this purchase requisition into a workflow. Once this is submitted, you also have the option to include comments, additional comments that you would like the purchasing agent to review. After updating those details, you click on submit and the purchase requisition moves forward in the workflow. Now, let's look into the next step where the purchasing agent will be reviewing the submitted purchase requisition. So purchasing agent Alicia wants to review the submitted purchase requisition. So Alicia is going to go into the purchase requisitions and look at purchase requisitions assigned to me. Alicia sees that 186 is assigned to her, and this was prepared by Brooke Dryden, and the status is in review. Right. So that purchase requisition is selected, and then Alicia is going to review the category, quantity details, and all of the information that's in there. Now we're going to update that, and Alicia, as a purchasing agent, is going to update the unit price as $80 for the toner and $350 for the paper shredding machine. And subsequently, she also updates the vendor to whom she would like to send this as a purchase order eventually. And at the bottom, you can also specify the discount if there is any that you would like to apply on the specific purchase requisition. Once all the details are in there, we will complete the purchase requisition, and then you also have an option to provide additional comments here. Now let's look into the next step where the requisitioner's manager is going to approve the purchase requisition. So we have the requisitioner's manager who's going to look into the purchase requisition by going into purchase requisitions and purchase requisitions that's assigned to me. Because the purchase requisition is more than $1,000, the workflow indicates it needs an approval. So the requisitioner's manager has gone into 186, looking at all the details, the price, quantity, and how much has been raised, and they have the option to approve or reject or request change or delegate. In our scenario, we're going to approve the purchase requisition and include additional comments if needed, and click on the approve button. So this has approved the purchase requisition. Now let's look into the next step where the original requisitioner, Brooke, can go and look into the latest status of the purchase requisition and the purchase order created from the purchase requisition. So HR assistant, Brooke, is now going to look into the purchase requisition created by her to check the latest status of that purchase requisition. So purchase requisition is prepared by me, and Brooke can see 186 that has a status of closed, which means it's approved and it's taken forward for creation of purchase order. And now we can also look at the purchase order that is created. So 4052 is the purchase order that's created from this specific purchase requisition. Let's move on to request for quotation. So organizations issue a request for quotation when they want to receive competitive offers from several vendors for the items or services that they must purchase. In a request for quotation, you ask vendors to provide the prices and delivery times for the item quantities that you specify. You can also ask vendors to specify whether there are any incidental charges such as shipping cost or any discounts for large orders or early payment of the vendor invoice. So purchasing agent can create a request for quotation from planned orders, from a purchase requisition, or by manual entry when they want to receive competitive offers from several vendors for the items or services that they must purchase. They can specify the item or category, the respective quantity, expected delivery date, expected payment terms, and vendors to whom the request for quotation should be sent. The purchasing agent can also amend the request for quotation after it is sent. After an RFQ is created and sent, vendors can respond to RFQs. If vendors are set up in vendor collaboration portal, they can directly respond to the bid in D365. For vendors not set up in the vendor collaboration portal, the purchasing agent can receive and register the RFQ replies. If a second iteration of a reply from a vendor is required, the RFQ can also be returned. The bids or responses to RFQs can be compared, and the contract can be awarded to the vendor. The bid that is accepted can be transferred to a purchase order or purchase agreement. Let's move on to the use case for creating requests for quotation. So Quantaso Entertainment System are selling pre-assembled luxury entertainment system to hotel customers. The luxury entertainment system requires cabinets to be purchased from vendors. So purchasing agent Alicia wants to invite suppliers into a bidding process to receive competitive offers from several vendors for standard cabinets, which has the item ID M0007, to be used in the luxury entertainment system. So as you can see, in this request for quotation use case, purchasing agent Alicia will be creating a request for quotation, selecting the item quantity and other details, and will subsequently select multiple vendors to whom the RFQ should be sent, inviting them to bid. Let's move on to the system and look at this process. So purchasing agent is going to go into request for quotation and all request for quotation. So here a new quote is going to be created and the PO type is going to be left as purchase order. We're going to specify the date that they would like the order to arrive and give a document title for this request for quotation. The delivery address is defaulted from the company that you're logged into, and we're going to click on OK. In the RFQ lines, you have the option to specify item or category. So in our scenario, we're going to specify item and the item ID M0007. We also have an expiration date for the RFQ that you can review and update. And then we're going to update the quantity. So we're going to say quantity as 100 and the expected unit price, and we're going to say it's going to be 75. So purchasing agent has updated all these details. And now we're going to go into the request for quotation header and specify the vendors that the purchasing agent would like to send the RFQ to. So in this scenario, we're going to specify the vendor as US 102, tailspin parts, and we would also like to send the RFQ to US 104, which is fabricant suppliers. You can also add vendors using vendor search and auto add vendors. And in the header, you also have an option to include an attachment that you would like to send to the vendor or any other questionnaire. Finally, when all the details are ready, we're going to send the RFQ to the vendor. Now, let's look into the RFQ that is generated for each vendor. So RFQ case 89 is created, and as you would recollect, we have two RFQs that is sent to two separate vendors. So when you go into the request for quotation journals, you can view that request for quotation 90 is sent to US 102 and request for quotation 91 is sent to US 104. Now let's look into the scenario where US 104 has access to D365 and will use the vendor collaboration portal to respond to the bid. So Hiren will play the role of an external vendor responding to the bid. Over to you, Hiren.
Thanks, Adi. So let's review a use case for submitting a bid. So in this use case, vendor agent will log into the vendor collaboration portal to review any new request for quote from customer. Vendor agent will review the new RFQ request, start the bid process, update payment terms, delivery terms, review the pricing and discount details, and finally submit a bid for the RFQ. So in this process flow, we have already seen that purchasing agent has sent RFQ to a couple of vendors. Now, I as a vendor will review the RFQ and respond to the RFQ using the bid process. So I am logging into a system as a vendor agent, and customer has already completed a process for onboarding vendor onto the D365. As part of D365, I get an access to see various information such as vendor information, vendor bidding information, purchase order confirmation details, as well as invoicing details. In this particular use case, we are interested in checking the vendor bidding. So I will go into the vendor bidding workspace. Once I click on the vendor bidding workspace, I will be presented with the vendor bidding workspace where I can see the different status of the bids, whether it's a new bid, return bid, or bids in progress. I can see that there is a new request for quotation from customer. So I will go and look into the details of this RFQ. As I can see, this RFQ is from Contoso Entertainment System, and I will verify the items which customer is requesting. So this is for standard cabinet item M007 for 100 quantity and requesting price of 75. Customer has not asked for any discount in this case, and the delivery date is set for 7/24. At this point of time, I can start the bidding process and I can update the details. So with this, I want to make sure that the quantity and unit price are correct. However, in order to get this contract, I would like to specify a discount. So I will specify a 5% discount, and that will reflect in the net amount. I'm not sure about the delivery date yet, as I need to confirm with the delivery department. So I will just save this bid and I will come out. I am not going to submit this bid for now. So as soon as I refresh this workspace, as you can see, there is no longer a new bid, but this bid has gone into the in progress. So now I can go ahead and continue editing the bid. So now that I have got the information on the delivery date from the delivery department, I can update the delivery date to 31st of July. And then I can verify other details in terms of item, quantity, price, and discount details. In addition to that, we have also got a confirmation from accounting department that we should update our payment terms with the customer. Instead of net 45, we should do it net 30. So I will update that terms of payment. And now everything is great and I can submit the bid. As soon as I submit the bid, this response will go back to the customer and customer will be able to review and see our replies. Now I will hand it over to Adi as a customer who will review the response and compare the replies.
Thanks, Hiren. So let's look into the use case of reviewing and accepting the RFQ. So purchasing agent Alicia wants to review the bid received from suppliers for standard cabinets M0007 to be used in the luxury entertainment system. And after reviewing and comparing the bid, Alicia would like to award the bid to vendor tailspin parts and transfer the bid to a purchase order. So as you can see, after the creation, submission of RFQ by the purchasing agent and receiving response to bid by vendors, in this use case, the purchasing agent will enter responses to bids from vendor who do not have vendor portal, and after comparing the RFQ bids, the contract will be awarded to vendor tailspin parts by creating a purchase order. So let's go and look into the system. As we discussed previously, we have RFQ 90 that's updated by the purchasing agent based on response from vendor 102 who does not use the vendor collaboration portal. And we have the other vendor, which is request for quotation, which is 91 from the other vendor, where the vendor has updated using the vendor collaboration portal. You have the option to accept and reject from here. Alternatively, we can also go to the request for quotation and click on compare replies to get a complete overview of all requests for quotations that you have received from all vendors. So as you can see, you can look at the unit price, discounts, and the net amount over here. You also have the option to filter these requests for quotations. If you would like to filter by just the lowest net amount by line, you do have that option. And we're going to go ahead and select US 102 and accept this request for quotation because it's cheaper than the other vendor. So I've selected that, and then on top, we're going to click on accept, and this will accept this request for quotation. When you accept a request for quotation, system automatically rejects all the remaining RFQs. So as you can see, the RFQ 91 against US 104 is going to be rejected over here. You also have the option to view accepted and rejected RFQs by using the filter buttons on top. So once you select rejected over here, you can view all the RFQs. And if you want to look at the purchase order that's created from this RFQ, we go to general and we click on purchase order button, and you can see purchase order 4005 that was created from that accepted RFQ. Now, Mathieu will take these purchase orders for further processing.
So thank you, Adi, to create this purchase order. So now we'll go to the process of inquiry and confirmation. So now as a purchasing agent, I can inquire and confirm this purchase order. So after you create the purchase order in Dynamics 365 supply chain management, you can inquire your vendor to validate price, quantity, date, and other information. Purchase order approval helps organization to run a workflow before confirming the purchase order. For example, when a purchase order is raised for an amount of exceeding $1,000, it's required approval from manager. Any changes that are made to confirm purchase order can have a significant impact on downstream processes such as planned production, service work, or sales order. So changing features help the organization to track and validate all change done to PO. The purchasing policy consists of a set of policy rules. For example, this catalog procedure rule specifies that the continuous interference system catalog must be used for internal procurement. After the purchasing policy is associated with a particular organization, employees of that organization see the continuous interference system catalog when they create a requisition. Let's jump into the scenario of purchase order inquiry and confirmation. So in this case, I will have one use case. So purchase requisition for toner cartridge and paper shredding machine of Procure was accepted and the purchase order was already created. So Alicia Sandberg, purchasing agent, wants to inquire the vendor Acme Office Supplies to validate the delivery date. So Alicia Sandberg receives a confirmation from the vendor that these items will be delivered on the 21st of July. So now let's jump into finance and operation. So here you can see I'm logging on Alicia Sandberg, so you can see the different workspace that they can use. So I will go to the purchase order preparation. Here you can see some fields where you can have some different information. But here I will go to approved purchase order without confirmation. So here you can see the purchase order that I just created. So it's approved. But now I want to have some more information. So to do that, I will go to purchase inquiry, and here you can find the information, and I can select print the document. So I will send this document, and I can print it. So here you can find all the information that Adi has already entered. Now, if you come back onto our workspace, we can see that the approved have down to 4, and we can see that purchase inquiry here, we have the purchase inquiry. So purchase inquiry is sent to this vendors. So I can select my purchase order to update the information. So now I will update the delivery date. So I have two options. So either I can do on the header level or I can do on the line level. So here I will do on the line level. So you have delivery date and confirm delivery date. So this is the date that is confirmed by the vendor. So I will do it on both line and then I can confirm. So I have two options here, confirmation or confirm. Confirm is direct action, so not pop up this form. So here I can also update some information and I can click on OK. So it will send the confirmation to the system. Now let's jump to the next process. Now we have confirmed our purchase order. We will review the process of receiving material and services using receiving processes. So receipt list helps organization to print a document that helps warehouse workers to receive the merchandise in case the process is not digitalized. Suppliers might share information about products that will be shipped. In this case, you can pre-register the product to record the information before the product are received. By pre-registering product, you reduce the amount of work that is required during item registration and receipt. Supplier can provide product information electronically through an advanced shipping notice, AFN, or that is then automatically recorded in the system. Product receipt registration often occurs in the inbound docks in a warehouse. It's performed either by using an analog device or through an arrival journal. Product receipt is the confirmation that you have received the products and registered the packing slip from the vendor. It validates inventory movement and financial transaction in case of. So now we'll go to, present two use cases. So the first use case will be like simple. So it will be generally used for service item or simple process. So Brick has received the toner cartridge and the paper shredding machine. She sent the packing slip received from the vendor to Alicia Sandberg, confirming that the product has been physically received. So Alicia Sandberg received these products in the system and they are now ready for invoicing. So now let's jump into finance and operation. So here, I also log out Alicia, so you can see the same, but I also another workspace for purchase order receipt and follow. So I will click on this one. So in the first, you can see several, lists. So here you have the list of the delayed delivery receipt. You have also pending receipt by vendor. So here it's taking all in the 5 days. As I will receive this one, I can select the one of today. So 0 days. Here I will choose another option because I have the packing slip. So I have my reference to the purchase order. So I will select my reference to my purchase order and I will click on my purchase. So here for sure we have different possibilities. But the first one, if you go to the line, you can enter some information on receive now. So it will help you to receive information. So when you buy the packing slip, you can select this information. I will not choose this one because I want to have a full receipt. So here, the first step is to enter my packing slip number from my vendor. So I will enter this information. Then I will go to my line where I can also update my quantity. So for example, here I can update my quantity and not say 10, but 8. And you can see that delivery and remain quantity will be 2. But I will say 10. Here, if you go on quantity on top, you can receive now quantity. So this is information coming from the line. Or order quantity, this is coming from the order. So now I'm ready to actually post my transaction. So I can click on print and OK. So it will validate, I will say my packing slip with the financial transaction and inventory transaction in case it's necessary. So now let's move to the next use case. Now I'm Sami Israel's. Sami Israel's first task every working day is to check the item arrivals. Sami sees that the standard cabinet will arrive today. Later in the morning, after the item is arrived, Sami Israel will register the item and validate the packing slip. So now let's jump into finance operation. As you can see, I'm looking at Israel. So here you have no workspace. So I will encourage you to create some workspace for this user. But here I have just one form. So I click on my form, so my arrival overview. So on the top, you have some option to filter the arrival that you want to see. So for example, here, I want to see only the arrival for today. I can see more arrival if I want. And when I want to start my process, I can click on the line and start the arrival process. So it will create an inventory arrival journal. So it can be split in 2 parts. So I can be a manager and create the arrival journal, and the arrival journal will be done by another people. But here I will do it all on the same users. So here you can see the quantity, the item. You can set up the reference of the purchase order. And now I will click on edit and I can first enter my packing slip. So Here I will enter the packing slip coming from the vendor, and then I will update my quantity. So in this case, I want to update. I will say I have just received only 80 quantity. And then I will post my transaction. So it will have the effect to register the transaction. So your stock is ready and it's registered. Then you can also post directly from here your product receipt. So it will take the packing slip number here and the quantities that you have registered. You can see it's the quantity registered. Then you can click on OK and it will post all your transactions. And now you can see in the product receipt that the quantity will be 20. So now these two purchase orders are ready to invoice. So over to you, Hiren.
Thank you, Mathieu. So far we have reviewed procurement processes using documents like purchase requisitions, RFQ, and purchase orders. We reviewed the process of receiving materials and services using the receiving process. Now let us review the next set of business processes in Procure to Pay process flow, which is vendor invoicing, vendor payments, and settlement. So vendor invoices are the request for payments for products and services. Vendor invoices might represent a bill for an ongoing services, or they can be based on the purchase order for specific items and services. Vendor invoice can be generated based on the purchase order and the product receipt for the goods or services received. Although some vendor invoices connect to a purchase order, vendor invoices can also contain lines that don't correspond to purchase order line. There are several ways to enter the vendor invoice. The vendor invoice register lets you quickly enter invoices that don't reference to a purchase order so that you can accrue the expenses. By using the vendor invoice approval journal, you can select those invoices and post them to the vendor balance to reverse the accrual. Invoice capture solutions that automatically creates vendor invoices from the digital invoice images. Optical character recognition, OCR, has become widely used by different industries in the past years. It's now common for printed text to be digitized so that they can be electronically edited, searched, stored more compactly, and displayed online. The evolution of AI technology has enabled modern OCR solutions to read different invoice formats from vendors without requiring much human intervention. More companies are recognizing that they can save effort and improve accuracy by processing invoices via automation instead of doing the manual processing. You can automate some accounts payable vendor invoicing processes. These processes include submitting imported vendor invoices to the workflow system and matching posted product receipt lines to pending vendor invoice lines. The automated process shows information about the progress of a vendor invoice as it moves through each of these processes. This capability can help accounts payable clerks and managers process vendor invoices more efficiently. It also helps reduce the errors and inefficiencies that can occur when information is manually entered and processed. You can create a new vendor invoice in the vendor collaboration invoicing workspace. If the vendor provides the PO number, the invoice will be associated with the purchase order. If the vendor doesn't provide the PO number, the invoice will be considered a non-PO invoice. Now, let us review a use case for the vendor invoice. April, who is an accounts payable clerk, received an invoice for toner cartridges and paper shredding machine from vendor 1001. This use case will show how vendor invoice will be entered and posted based on the purchase order and the product receipt. So April will log into the system as accounts payable clerk, and she'll log into the accounts payable module and will look at the list page which says purchase orders received but not invoiced. This list page will show all the purchase orders which are received but not yet invoiced. We are specifically interested in purchase order 4052. So April can basically look at all the details of this purchase order. By clicking into it, we will review the details of the purchase order. You can see that there are two items. We can verify their prices and quantity. We can see that this purchase order line has a two-way matching policy setup, and that we will see in the next process. So now I will click this purchase order and generate this invoice. When this process completes, it is going to transfer the purchase order line to the vendor invoice journal line, and we should be able to see two lines. As you can see, all the lines carried forward. Now we will specify the vendor invoice number. So I'll specify vendor invoice 4052, and I will specify the vendor invoice description that this is for purchase order 4052. I will then specify the invoice date, and at this moment, this vendor invoice header has match status not performed. However, if you see the line level, the price are matching. So this is where you can do the two-way matching and three-way matching depending on the policy you have set up. If I change the unit price from 80 to something else, so I will change this to, let's say, 100. As you will see, the price match is going to fail. So this way, system will restrict you to move forward. I can also see the same details at the line level, or I can click on the matching details and I will be able to see that the unit price is not matching and so is the net amount. Now I will go back to the vendor invoice journal line and I will change my unit price back to 100. As soon as I change my unit price back to 80, now we should be able to see that prices are matching at the line level. So now we can go ahead and do the update match status. And you will see that at the header level, the update match status is passed because at the line level, all the price match and two-way matching policies are passed. So now we are ready to go ahead and post this vendor invoice. Once we post it, we will be able to see the status changes here. If my header status, matching status is not passed, system will restrict us and not allow us to post invoice. So now, as you can see, the purchase order status is invoiced. And if I refresh this list page, this purchase order is no longer available as part of this process. Now, next is the vendor payment process. The vendor payment process in accounts payable is the process of paying vendors or the suppliers for goods purchased or the services rendered. So Dynamics 365 Finance offers extensive functionality for setting up various vendor payment options. Organizations that include multiple legal entities can create and manage payments by using a single legal entity that handles all the payments. Therefore, the same payment don't have to be entered in multiple legal entities. In a centralized payment organization, there are many legal entities for operations, and each operating legal entity manages its own vendor invoice. However, payment for all these operating legal entities are generated from a single legal entity. Organizations often use payment proposals to create vendor payments because the payment proposal query can be used to quickly select vendor invoices for payment based on the due date, cash discount, and any other criteria. Organizations might issue advance payments to vendors for goods or services before those goods or services are fulfilled. There are two methods that organization can use for advance payment or prepayments. One method creates a prepayment invoice that's associated with a purchase order. This method is referred as prepayment invoicing. Organizations that don't want to track prepayment as closely or don't receive a prepayment invoice from their vendor can use the prepayment journal. Use the payment schedule to pay invoices in installment. For example, an invoice of a $10,000 is recorded. It is paid at $2,000 USD each month until the balance is paid. During this period, the invoice is not considered past due if the scheduled payments are made on time. This is also known as finance plan or contract payments. Occasionally, after vendor payment has been posted, the payment must be reversed. It is possible to delete a payment only if its status isn't created, which means payment has been created but hasn't yet been generated. You can void unposted checks after they have been generated, but before they have been posted. If generated payment is done as an electronic fund transfer, you can recheck the payment before it is posted. After a payment is posted, payment reversal process will be used. Payments that are made electronically can't be reversed after they have been posted. Instead, a new transaction must be created for the amount of the payment to get the liability back on the vendor's account. Now, let us review a use case for issue and settling the vendor payment. Oscar, who is an accounts payable manager, will review the vendor invoice 4052, which is due for payment for vendor 1001. Oscar will generate a vendor payment and settle the payment against a vendor invoice to close the open vendor transaction. So Oscar will log into the system as accounts payable manager, and now we'll go into a workspace called vendor payments. As you can see in this vendor payment workspace, we have different tiles to create a new vendor payment run, or the vendor payment run not posted, or the vendor payment assigned to me. You can also create some process automations for vendor payments. Other than that, you can see invoices past due, payments not settled, and you can also find specific transactions. In this case, we want to create a new vendor payment run. So we'll create a new vendor payment journal and we'll go into the lines. We want to do a payment for a specific vendor 1001. So we will use the payment proposal process and we'll create a new payment proposal. Here, I will specify different query criteria. In this case, we are specifically looking to pay vendor 1001. So I will select that as a query criteria. And this will show me all the pending vendor invoices for this vendor 1001. So in this list, we are only interested to pay at this moment vendor invoice 4052. So I will select all the rest of the invoices and remove it from the list. Once I remove all the other invoices, I will be able to select the vendor invoice 4052 and click on create payments. What will happen is this vendor invoice line will be transferred to the vendor payment journal line. And as you can see, it will create a payment journal line for vendor 1001 for $1,500. And the method of payment is check. However, payment status is still none. So at this point, we can go ahead and generate the payments. I will select the method of payment as check. I will select the bank account and I'll click OK. So this will create a document, which is a check. And we will, for time being, we'll do a print archive for this check and we'll click OK. So this should create a pre-printed check with all the details. Let's review a check quickly. So as you can see, the check has been generated for Acme Office Supply vendor for $1,500. This will be printed on the pre-printed stationery. Now the payment status of this vendor payment journal line is sent. And now we should be able to see the view marked transactions. So as you can see, this vendor payment line is marked against this vendor invoice. So there is an automatic settlement happen for this specific vendor payment. Now we can go ahead and post this vendor payment journal line. So this concludes a demo of showing how a vendor payment can be made against a vendor or open vendor invoice and how the transactions will be settled against each other. Now, next is the vendor settlement process. Vendor settlement is the process of settling an invoice against a payment or credit note. A settlement is not a transaction, but it is a link between the payment and the invoice. Also note that the finance consider an unsettled invoice as unpaid. System can be configured for automatic settlement, where a transaction will be settled automatically against other open transactions when it is posted. Otherwise, users can manually settle the transactions when they enter the payments. Partial payment can be made for a vendor invoice. System provides capability to support multiple scenarios for taking cash discounts while making partial vendor payments, some within the same cash discount period, and in some other scenario outside the cash discount period. There are scenarios when the accounting manager reviews and approves the accounts payable transactions. They realize that a consulting fee was paid twice and they want to reverse the settlement. Other scenario could be if the bank does not honor a payment or if you use the wrong date or settlement amount, then reverse settlement process can be used. Let us review a use case for vendor settlement process. Sarah, who is an accounts payable manager, would like to review open vendor transactions. Sarah will review advance payment made to vendor US 104 and will settle the vendor invoice against the advance payment to close the vendor transaction. So Sarah will now log into the system and will go to the all vendors. In this case, she is particularly interested in open transactions for US 104 vendors. She'll filter this record for all vendors and now go into the vendor balance screen. And as you can see, there are open transactions for these vendors. So we'll click on the open transactions and we can see all the advance payment as well as the pending vendor invoices for this vendor. We are interested in vendor invoice 110. So let's look at the settlement. And as you can see, currently this vendor invoice is not settled against any vendor payments. So we'll click on the settlement and now we'll try to settle this transaction. We'll select the vendor invoice 110 and we see that there is one other $400 prepayment transaction. So we will select that to settle against each other. As soon as I select it, the system shows that this is a prepayment transactions and we want to mark it against a vendor invoice. So now this prepayment vendor transaction is marked against a vendor invoice. Now we will close this screen and as you can see, the vendor prepayment and vendor invoice is no longer in the list. So we'll go back to the vendor and we'll see the vendor transactions. Now we want to verify that the vendor payment and vendor invoices are settled against each other. So we can go ahead and look at the settlements. And now as you can see, the vendor invoice is marked against a prepayment for that vendor. So this concludes a demo of how you can explicitly do a vendor settlement for a vendor invoice against a prepayment. This is pretty much what we had in mind for today's session. If you would like to see or deep dive into some specific procure-to-pay business processes, use case or other scenarios, please feel free to provide your comments in the chat and we can prioritize our next tech talk accordingly. We want to share some useful resources. We recently released a new AI feature in procurement area to review and accept changes to confirm purchase orders. Please review and let us know your feedback in the Yammer group. Here, there are some links for our previous tech talks. We have comprehensive documentation and training in the procure-to-pay area. My favorites are the Yammer groups. If you haven't joined these Yammer groups, please join. Ask your queries here. Product team not only announce new features, but also review your queries and provide answers. Now that we have some time left for Q&A, Adi or Mathieu, do we have any outstanding question? I know we are top of the hour, so I'm not sure we will be able to take any questions, but what we will do, if there are any unanswered question, we will put it as part of our presentation, and when we'll publish it, you will be able to see those outstanding questions which are not answered. So with that, I'll hand it over to Alejandra.
Thank you, Hiren. Thank you, team. Yeah, if your question hasn't been answered during the event, we will add the responses in the presentation shared in our Dynamics community page. Thank you for attending, and thanks to our presenters and your audience for attending our Tech Talk today. We hope you have a great rest of your day ahead.